All right, so I'm Gail Osborne. I am the president of Foster Family Alliance of North Carolina, and we're super excited to have some people rejoin us tonight, along with some new faces. And so we are here tonight to um, welcome Empty Frames Initiative, along with Miriam Cobb, along with Miss Carmelita Coleman with Sayso, and both of them have brought some guests with them. And so I am going to turn this over to Miriam and Miss Carmelita and let them take the show, and then they'll introduce the individuals that they brought with them.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Miss Carmelita with Sayso. I just want to say happy National Foster Care Month. We are absolutely delighted to be here tonight, and I will turn it over to Miss Miriam Cobb with Empty Frames, who will take it over.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being on the call today, and thank you especially to the Foster Family Alliance in North Carolina and Sayso for sponsoring us being on the call tonight. I'm Miriam Cobb. I'm the founder and director at Empty Frames Initiative. We are a nonprofit dedicated to empowering youth as they transition out of state care. We look to do this by providing training in life skills, counseling, community, and access to the gospel in time, and our long-term vision is through a short-term residential program. And you might be wondering, how does that apply to the story of foster care, our book? And we're going to talk about that a little bit tonight. Our book was born out of the idea that we needed to make our long-term vision something smaller, that people could see something really tangible. So most of the curriculum that we will be using in our future programs has already been created. We're taking a lot of successful programs from other people and putting it all together for our residential living program. But we did create one piece of curriculum that's unique to us, and it's storytelling through photography. It's a 6-week course that teaches literacy through photography and writing. Individuals would come, and over the course of 5 or 6 weeks, they would learn techniques, how to use their camera, how to tell their stories to others. And we needed to pilot this curriculum with individuals. And so we started by putting out a call to organizations we knew, like Sayso. We posted to some foster parent groups, and we were looking for people who were already very comfortable telling their stories, who weren't going to be triggered or traumatized by retelling their stories this first time, because we didn't have the resources to find a counselor at that time. I'm really thankful, though, that one of our foster care alumni voices was also a licensed clinical social worker who had been trained in counseling, because when it came down to it, after spending the time telling our stories, we really did need to have the space and a person who was willing to talk it out further if needed. So they went through our storytelling through photography workbook, and we asked them to all come together in their groups. So we had 3 groups. One was 3 individuals with, one was a group of individuals with prior experience in foster care, so 3 former foster care alumni. We had 2 social workers who did a session with us, and we had 2 foster parents who did a session with us. And altogether, what came of it was this book. We also put all of their stories and photographs into gallery format, and we toured that around Raleigh. And we tried to explain to people some of these, the way that these tools will be utilized in our future programs. So when we say life skills, photography in and of itself is a life skill, but the ability to communicate with others, the ability to share your story is the main life skill coming out of it. They were able to get community with the people there and also with us. We were really blessed to maintain a relationship with a lot of the people who went through our trial program. It led to us being at weddings and events and birthday parties, and also helping with day-to-day things like moving furniture and helping people get into a new home, applying for jobs, just those types of things. Counseling did happen in a very relaxed format, and We are a faith-based organization, and the entire curriculum does point back to the gospel. So yeah, that went a lot quicker than I thought it was going to, but it's good because it gets more time for us to talk to our authors. So today we have 4. We have some people on the call who were involved in the creation of the book, but we have 4 authors that are going to be on a panel for us today, and they are all so incredible. I love the people that I got to work with and meet, and they have unique stories. But I'm just going to introduce, for the purpose of this webinar, I'm just going to introduce them from the perspective that they told. So their foster care youth voice was, we have 2 of those on the call today, Angela Kiata Banks and Sarah Chambers. We have Danielle Delinsky Sloan for the social worker voice. I'm not sure, I haven't seen her come into the, okay, yeah, she's there, I see her. And we have Kelly Hazanitz for the foster parent voice. So I'm gonna start with Angela Kiata Banks. And we have a couple of questions that we prepared beforehand, and then we're going to have Carmelita share some about Sayso, and then Gail will facilitate some additional questions from the audience if you want to ask any questions and talk to us about it further. So I keep wanting to say Angie. I'm gonna do it right. So Angela, the first question that we were going to talk about was, how can foster parents and social workers help youth navigate sharing their story? And do you think there's an ideal age for this to start?
Well, first of all, I just want to say, again, it's nice to see you and see everyone. And thank you for being a part of this, like asking me to be a part of this. And nice to see Sarah, Danielle. Can't see Miss Carmelita yet, but I saw her earlier. It's been really, really, that experience was absolutely amazing. And I think really created a space that I didn't realize would heal, different levels of trauma that I experienced in foster care, before foster care, and even after foster care. So I just want to say that. I would say, definitely creating spaces as Empty Frames Initiative, Miriam and Crystal did, where you're able to be vulnerable and feel like you're trusting the adults around. Because if you go through life before, having a space and having at least one supportive adult where you just don't trust anyone or barely trust anyone, and are just really struggling to, one, have confidence in yourself, have confidence in others going to show up for you, going to still care about you. I think that's like one of the underlying things with a lot of young people in foster care is like, if I tell you some of the deepest and darkest things about me, are you still gonna love me? Are you still gonna care about me? And it's really, really hard to talk about those things. And it's really painful sometimes because we repress a lot of those emotions and memories. So I would say, one, creating a space to, to be vulnerable, to know that this person, whoever that is, as a supportive adult, is actually trustworthy, and they're still going to care about you after you, say something that has been really troubling you through trauma. Another thing would be just making sure that the youth knows that they are safe. So that could be at any age, that could be at 5, that could be at 3. And for me, I would say I started kind of seeing the importance of telling my story when I was like 8. So I tried to, put that in poetry words. I'm a poet. So I did a lot of writing poetry or drawing things. So I really wasn't able to share it until a little bit later, but definitely putting in place and making sure that consistently there's a space where, you have a space that youth can come to. That could be a room, that could be a corner, that could be a couch, that could be, a whole living room space. And like, what, on Fridays we have family day, and really making sure the youth knows that they are a part of whatever community that looks like, whether that's the family, the household, For us in this particular experience, it was, a room in a little cohort, and we shared, things that I don't think a lot of us anticipated to share. But we all knew that we had each other's back, and, it was okay if we cried. It wasn't a moment to be strong, another thing, which was hard at first, but just knowing that you can be yourself and you can share those pieces of you, you will be cared. The youth will be cared for after you're sharing those hard pieces.
Absolutely. I love everything you said. Creating a space for people, making sure to be reassuring about, I'm still going to be here after I hear everything. You can't say anything that's going to make me leave. And I just love that, because we all need that. It doesn't matter the age. Like you said, it could start at 5, it could start at 8. We all need somebody who's going to say, I'm here whenever you're ready to talk to me. So Kelly is next, and I feel like it plays into the same thing. Kelly Hazanitz was one of our foster parent voices, and her family fostered and adopted 2 children to their family through foster care. And the next question was, how can foster parents be careful while telling their story to preserve the privacy of the youth in their care previously in their care? And I think that plays in the same part, because it's like, if we're going to create a space where they can have safety in telling their stories, how can we in turn share our stories with others without compromising their privacy? Kelly.
Yeah, I think the intentional part that was surprising to me was not oversharing when being asked questions. I've found that people can be very intrusive and ask questions that I don't think I was prepared for, maybe. Questions that I don't think they would ask any other child's history in the way that they felt okay to ask about children who were placed in our care. And we got pretty comfortable just saying, I'm not comfortable sharing that with you, or even just, I don't know, just because I didn't want to get into it. And I don't think I knew how to share my part of the story because I was trying to protect the stories of the children in our care. And through this storytelling program, curriculum, I think it helped me see that I can share my feelings throughout this process and journey for me, and the ways that I've grown as a parent and as a person. And I was hesitant to not want the focus to be on me as a foster parent, because I don't think that's where it should be, because that's where it tends to be sometimes. And but I think this helped me see that when I share the pieces from my story, it shows the children who are in my care, hopefully, how they've impacted me in a positive way, or how what I've learned by just being a part of their story, even if it was for a short time or a long time or for forever, that I'm hoping doing that correctly and just sharing my part and not their details that people kind of want to just be nosy and figure out. I'm hoping that gives all those pieces and kind of shows how much I've been impacted through them, and also just how real my feelings were, because I think they might not know, and they deserve to know that.
Yeah, we had so many responses about each artist's work, and Kelly and Jason's role as foster parents. It really, I think it did show people a lot, and it's going to be something that their kids can look back on for sure. But it already started, a wave of understanding for different people. It acknowledged the brokenness and the beauty of it, and it gave everyone an opportunity to just, I think one of the things that I really loved about having their work involved in it, because you're right, foster parent voices are heard really often. was just being able to validate other people that it's like, hey, you're not the whole story, but you are a part of it, and you're integral to this going well. And having two foster parents that were so encouraging and supportive of their kids made it to where when we're talking about the hard stuff, when parents maybe aren't able to or aren't as caring, we can be like, but there are people who care. There are people who are going to be there for you. So the next person is Danielle. She wrote as one of our social worker voices. And while she's no longer with DSS, she is working with a community-based mental health service and gets to work with many foster youth in a different capacity. So we see in the book, but also I think everyone on this call probably sees it in real life, that social workers play a huge role in the system and in so many lives. And in the book and in our conversations, it's clear that the system has a major impact on you as a social worker. Do you have any suggestions for people who need help defining their own story within the story of the system or even outside of it?
Okay, I'm going to ask you to ask me that last part again, because I think that was a little bit different than the question I had in the email before. And then I can get
I thought I was reading it. I'm sorry. Help finding purpose in the routine. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So can you just read that last part of the question again, if you don't mind?
Yes. Do you have any suggestions for people who need help defining their own story within the story of the system, or help finding a purpose in the routine?
Gotcha. As far as a social worker, I think I'll only speak for myself. I don't know about the other social worker who went through this process, but I found it really odd when I was asked to share my story, because when I came into it, I was like, oh, well, I'll be telling like this story of foster care, maybe like from like that lens. But when I was asked to tell like my own story, I was like, oh, I don't normally do that. I normally try to prop up, the youth and our foster families to be able to tell their own story, which is incredibly valuable. And so to then kind of switch my thought process and think about like my own story as a social worker in foster care was different. And I enjoyed that process. And I think most people become a social worker, become a helping professional for a reason, whether that is because they've experienced something in their life, or they have seen something or witnessed something or been a part of something that makes them want to do more. So I think it's really a noble profession. And so I think there's always a reason behind that. So to be able to tell your story as a professional, I think is an interesting perspective that I got to be a part of, and I enjoyed that. As far as propping up the youth to be able to tell their story, I think that, we have to take the lead for the youth in telling the story how they want to tell it, choosing what they want to say and how they want to say it. And creative opportunities like the Photo Voice Project, I think, are really exciting ways that youth, especially teenagers and young adults, are really excited about being a part of, and being able to have that opportunity to have their voice heard in a really unique way, while also like gaining some technical skills and gaining some creative skills. So I like that whole process with the Photo Voice Project. Did that answer the question?
Yes, I think that the reason I changed it, and it kind of threw it off, because I sent you that and then I changed it when I was saying it out loud. I would love to know your thoughts for people who feel like they might be a little bit lost in the system. They went in with this, and like you said, it's a noble profession. They have anticipated that they were going to be able to do that, but there's so much to it. Mm-hmm. And if they're feeling a little bit lost in all of the voices and all of the stories that they're interacting with, do you have any, maybe even just like self-care ideas on how they can take a moment to think about their own story and purpose?
Yeah, I think it's really easy as a social worker, especially to get lost in the everyday hustle. Like there's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of red tape when it comes to being in child welfare that I think most social workers don't enjoy. Like we enjoy actually interacting with clients and like feeling like we're making a difference, and that can get really lost sometimes when you're just buried under paperwork. And so I think continuing to like reframe it and have those important conversations with youth so that you are, you know, coming back to like, why did I start doing this? Like, what is the reason I chose this career, and continuing to have those conversations that remind you, and allowing those youth voices to be heard is part of that reminder. Like doing this process, doing the photo voice process, it was, you know, a reminder to me, hearing the youth stories and thinking about my own story, my own development as a social worker, like, am I still being true to myself in the profession? Am I doing what I set out to do? And part of the reason no offense against child welfare, love child welfare professionals, but part of the reason I decided to go to mental health was I had a lot of youth who were telling me their stories, some for the first time, and making disclosures to me about really difficult, traumatic things. And I wanted to be able to support them in a different way and to gain some of those clinical skills, which is why I decided to, you know, gain some mental health clinical skills as well. So I think just trying to remember why you started is really important. And also for not just social workers, but any adult that's working with youth, secondary trauma is real. So hearing those traumatic stories and you know, reading documents, which does not tell the whole story, but just, you know, reading those things and hearing those things can weigh on you quite a bit. And sometimes we compartmentalize things and push them to the side and kind of push our own feelings to the side a little bit. That can definitely lead to burnout. It's unfortunate that you do see social workers who are well past the point of burnout. So being truthful and honest with yourself. Are you at that point? Do you need to take a step back? Do you need to engage in some self-care and do some work for yourself to be able to get to, you know, get back to that place where it makes sense for you to do this work still? It makes sense for you to be a helping professional, I think is important. So just kind of checking in regularly and getting the support that you need to take care of those like secondary trauma issues is important.
Awesome. Yes, that's perfect. And I think it applies to, again, everybody in here. If you're an advocate, if you're a social worker, if you're a foster parent, I think all those suggestions apply. Why are you doing it? And where are you at currently? The next one is for Sarah. And this was something that we talked about a lot in the classes with the former foster youth. And I should say, all of our participants were really great, because when we set it up, I knew that we were going in and we were doing a lot of work, but I asked them to show up 5 days in a row, 1 week, to do these sessions that were supposed to be like once a week for like 6 weeks. And so we had a lot of talking really fast, a lot of processing that happened quickly. And one of the things that kept coming up was, what's my story and what's my family's story? And Sarah had some great insights for this, and I wanted to ask her to share how can foster parents empower the youth in their care to understand the distinction between respecting their family's story and honoring their personal story so they can get the healing that they need. Is Sarah still on here?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry. I was slow to unmute. So I'll try to address this in my tangential roundabout way. But I think it goes back to what Kelly was saying about sometimes we hesitate to share. And, you know, the reality is our stories are intertwined. And so we don't know, how do we share what's true to us and honor, you know, allow those folks to have their own voice. But at the end of the day, I think the story gets best told by us speaking up. And then that, you know, the great thing about this book is it's comprehensive. You get all the stories and you get a good picture because of those, multiple voices. So I just encourage everybody to share what's true for you. And, that's how the whole story gets told. And so looking back, I guess if I turn my clinical brain off and I don't think about, what foster parents should do to help children heal, because that's often something that is the goal, or, that's expected. I think about what works for me or what worked for me. And so I think about my foster mom, and if you've read the book, you can see what I wrote about her, and I wrote about her, what a respite she was. But the way I tell the story is she was 70 years old, I believe, when I met her, and she had cared for hundreds of girls who were deemed at risk. So it was what was called therapeutic foster care, which is a higher level need level than traditional foster care. And so I entered her care from a juvenile detention facility. But what I appreciated about her, and what was different about her than every other adult in my life up until that point, was she was relaxed around me. So up until that point, most of the adults that I had encountered I always felt like I was under a microscope. They were always kind of pathologizing me. And even behaviors that were, I now know, normal teenage behaviors were looked at through this lens of, again, just pathologizing. And there wasn't a lot of grace for, oh, this is like typical teenage development. And then you add trauma on top of that. Right. And so prior to that, it felt very internalizing, right? Like there's something wrong with me. And what I learned as I grew up and processed through things was, no, in fact, I was having a very normal reaction to an abnormal experience. And so I think if you throw any child into that situation, or even a lot of adults, what kind of reaction is going to occur? Trauma is not normal. And so, just remembering that. And so my foster mom, she was great because she had seen it all, everything under the sun. And so she was like, seen it all, heard it all. And she was relaxed. And so what I look back and I appreciate about her was she didn't put me under the microscope. She didn't push me to talk about trauma that I wasn't ready to talk about. It was, how was school? She did the things to make sure that I was on the path to healing. So for example, I talked in the book about the time that she devoted to me. She took me to my doctor's appointments and to counseling. And she did the things that I needed done, but it wasn't within this frame of there's something wrong with you. And again, that was the first time in my life that I ever had that. Sorry. I always get emotional when I talk about her. So, I don't know. There's no magic recipe for, every kid's different. I'm sure you've heard that. But one thing that helped me to process my life as it had been, I'm going to share a quote that I found that really just hit me like a ton of bricks because, so I was on probation from age 12 to 18. And then I had custody of my younger brother. And I always just felt like life was so big. Like I had an awareness of I was young, but everything around me and all these experiences were so big. And I didn't know what to do with them. And, I went to church and I went to college and got a degree in psychology. And, I did all these things trying to kind of make sense. And then I came across this quote, and I'll just share it because it's what makes sense to me in my life. And it's the prescription that's healed me. So I will share it for you. I actually got this off of an Oprah episode. So Toni Morrison, when she was asked what she wants readers to take away from her work, Some of the messages she wants to convey are pastel strokes, not the heavy, thunderous ones, but the willingness to take risk with one's life, a willingness to live an enchanted life, a life where these things mean something, a willingness to see the other side of things. It's like turning up the volume on your life, not just to turn it on, but to turn it up. Some people used to complain that the characters in my books were not realistic, that they were bigger than life. And I kept saying, no, no, life is big. They're as big as life, and we make life small. We want to make it tiny and think of it only as our income or other things. Life is big and we have it now. This is it. So let's do it. And that I stopped and I rewound the DVD at the time and wrote that down, because that was the most affirming thing I had ever heard. No, life is big. And the suffering that had occurred within me and to me was because I was trying to put it into these neat little boxes, or I was trying to fit into somebody else's story of, well, this happened and you should then feel this way. No, I actually feel this way, and I don't know what that means, and I don't know how to remedy it, but this is the truth. And so just really accepting that, yes, this is big and chaotic and beautiful and amazing and awful, is the truth. And so I think if you can find a way to honor the dichotomies of youth, the good, the bad, the ugly, the complex, the beautiful, right? And like Angela said, sorry, giving that space and just not feeling like you have to fix it is so therapeutic. But still, again, taking the steps to make sure that they're taken care of. That's all.
Yeah, there's a lot, and it is big, and it's all very complicated, and I like that, and letting it be big. And I haven't personally worked with a lot of youth in the care system one-on-one, but every now and then I'll get to talk to social workers and to a couple kids. And what you're saying just reminds me, there's so many people that are like, well, they just want to do all this crazy big stuff. And it's like, well, they could do crazy big stuff. Their life has been weird. They've been given an opportunity, and encouraging them to tell their stories, encouraging them to dream further and to think of those big things. It's a really beautiful opportunity that you have as a foster parent to encourage them in the new steps that their life can be now. So I feel like I might have said that wrong, but I'm trying. I'm trying. So Angela, I feel like we kind of talked about this already because of the beginning, but I'm going to ask it again anyway. When did you first feel comfortable sharing your story with others, and how has that comfort played into your new book, The Black Foster Youth Handbook?
So thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing all of that. I get very, very emotional about things, so I'm just like trying to keep it together. But yes, when I was 15, 16, I became mute because of all the trauma. It manifested itself in a way that it was like, what is the point of sharing your voice? What is the point of having an opinion? What is the point of saying anything? Because, nothing is really going to change. At the time, now I understand things a lot differently, but at the time there was a lot of extreme poverty situations, like living in a 1-bedroom hotel with 8 family members, and a lot of mental health issues with my parents. So that came out as neglect, that came out as physical abuse towards myself and my siblings. And so after going through several years of back and forth instability and other things, I just was like, what's the point of talking? What's the point of screaming? What's the point of anything? And I was in a very not so great state. So around 15, 16, I became mute. And I was at my 20th new school. I was a new kid again, which meant that everyone wants to ask you 1,000,001 questions about who you are, where you came from, why you're here, who are your parents, all the things. And I just didn't have the energy to answer those questions, nor did I want to, because they weren't that great of answers. So I just wrote notes. And I think after maybe the 6th or 7th meltdown, randomly in the middle of Spanish class or math class, that I was finally given a note to go to the counselor's office. The first few times that I got the note to go to the counselor's office, I just went to the bathroom for like an hour and a half and was like, all right, it's probably enough time. And I came back to class until eventually I did go to the counselor's office. And I started talking to my school counselor. She asked me, how are you? Which I hated that question for the longest time. And eventually I did tell her how I was, which is I feel horrible. There's a lot going on, and I think that was probably the first moment that I started speaking about really, to someone that wasn't like my grandmother, or even then she didn't really know what was going on. But as I started to speak more, and then I was placed into foster care when I was 16. So I started writing poetry again. I had stopped writing poetry because I moved so often and it would get thrown away. So I was like, well, would I say again, furthering my my ideas that my voice and my story and all the other things were not worthy of anything. So anyways, by the time I was 17, 18, I was in foster care. I started writing poetry. And from there, I was asked to say one out loud. Ironically, one of the poems was entitled A Life in Silence. It's in the Black Foster Youth Handbook. And what really changed the game for me was seeing the impact that it made on the people that I was sharing the poetry to. And the people that came up to me, because the entire time my voice was shaking. I felt like I was about to cry. Everything started to get hot. I started sweating. And, after I got off, it was like this little stage area. And people started coming up to me and was like, wow, like I really resonated, with what you said. And I learned that I wasn't alone. Other people had experienced extreme levels of poverty, of abuse, of any kind of trauma, childhood trauma, and were able to relate to what I said. And before then, I really thought that it was just me. It was just me. And the same thing with foster care, as I, started to connect more with people like Sarah and other young people that experienced foster care. It was like, wow, like there's so many of us, like we need to band together. Hold on. But yeah, it was a really frustrating time and it was really painful. And I thought that my voice didn't have a value. But as I started to see the impact on others and realize the importance of sharing my story, which was really to empower others to share their story. And that way, we can really get to the root of these issues and, not just put a bunch of band-aids on this for the symptoms, but really find the cure to the root of the issues, which are a lot deeper than what I had even anticipated. But yeah, that's pretty much where I would say is it was a spoken word event. And from there, going to the Empty Frames Initiative program, which furthered, and again, just a completely different aspect of healing that I would have even imagined, and finding community and the people that have experienced the same. experiences or similar experiences that I did, and knowing that I wasn't alone, knowing that I was still lovable, knowing that people still cared about me and I cared about them, and we can move forward in that. So all those different experiences, and others that have to do with advocacy, political advisory, those types of things, really pushed me to feel empowered to share my story. What was the second part of that question, Miriam?
Yeah, no, just how did that play into you writing the Black Foster Youth Handbook? And I feel like you said it perfectly. You realized that your voice was needed, that it was something that other people related to, and empowered to do it. You can add to that, but I feel like you answered it really well.
Yes, that is the answer.
Yeah, and we're seeing already, and I think you guys hosted Angela's book a few months ago, but so many people are just commenting and sharing all the time how much that hearing from her has meant to them and changing lives already. So I love that. The next question was for Danielle. In your role as a social worker, how did you equip youth and parents to understand the value of everyone's story? I feel like you guys probably talk about this all the time as social workers to foster parents, but how did you navigate saying that each part was important?
So I think, as it's been said, each youth is different. Each youth's story is different. Each youth's level of resiliency is different. Some youth, by the time they're sharing their story with a foster parent, have a level of resiliency, and some are still working on it. And some need that support to build the resiliency. So there's differing levels of, when a youth is prepared to share that information and how much they're going to share. A lot of times when youth come into care, we find that there's a lot we don't know that we learn later on. So there's a lot more like disclosure about things that happen that come up later on. So as it's been said, just which perfectly by Angela, is being able to have that space to allow them to share, honoring their choice about what they share with you, how much they share with you, and when they share that with you, and not like there's no cookie cutter story. It's not like this youth had this trauma, so this is how they're going to feel about it, or this is how they experience it, or this is what's going to happen, right? So each youth, their experience of that trauma is a little bit different, and recognizing that and honoring that that's their story and how they tell their story is important. And youth that come into care, especially youth in foster care, there's that they feel are not in their control. They're out of control of their story, or they feel out of control of their story and what's happening to them, and to move foster homes. So to be able to give them back that control to say, you can tell your story in whatever way that you wish to tell your story. And so having creative opportunities like the Photo Voice Project to allow them to say how much they want to say and to share that story how they want to share it is really important. So giving them the voice. And then, like I said, educating caregivers and social workers alike on how trauma can show up in lots of different ways. So it can be behavioral, it can be emotional, it can be internal or externalized. So there's a lot of different ways that trauma can show up, and understanding that is really important. And then, like I said, it just goes back to taking care of yourself when people are sharing that story, to be there, to be supportive as you can in that moment, and also take the time to practice self-care and to be able to take care of yourself so that you are a better support person. And did that answer that question?
Awesome. Yeah.
Okay.
Kelly, I didn't I'm hoping this question's okay. This is something that I've seen a lot in foster parent groups that it just comes up all the time. How do you do anything special to preserve your adopted children's stories, and their however that would look? I don't. Yeah.
I think it's the hard part is as a foster parent or an adoptive parent, we often don't know much of their story prior to coming to us, especially if it's younger children or even school age or older children that aren't ready to share things with us yet, or maybe didn't understand what was happening enough to share it. So I think the danger often is to just start their story at their adoption or when they came into our home. Kind of like that's their beginning and that's their start. And I think that's out of a bit of a fear as adoptive parents or foster parents that we don't want to bring up things that might have been traumatic for them, or we don't know how to help them tell that story when they're not ready to yet. So for us, since our children were younger or school age and not able or not ready to share, one of the most valuable things we have been able to do is have connection and relationships with their first family and their birth family. It hasn't been parents, but grandparents and aunts and cousins and sisters, people who were a part of that story firsthand that understand and can answer questions that they might have now or as they grow or as they start understanding and processing things. Just giving them that opportunity and that access to grow those relationships, and not as the parent, as the foster or adoptive parent, trying to repaint what that story was because we want to shield them or protect them, but letting them, as they're ready, ask the questions that they need to ask and get the answers. And that's just not something that I'm able to really do well since I wasn't a part of that. And that beginning, however long it was before they came into my life, it's a huge part of their story and has affected them positively, negatively, all kinds of ways. And giving them access to that, I think, has been very valuable and will be valuable for them, for us, for our family. And then a little bit more specific, maybe, as things that we do in those family interactions, or just stalking on Facebook. If I find baby pictures or anything like that, I print them out and putting them all away, or putting them up in their room for a family that they are involved with now. And something that was important for us that we had heard was prior to our children, our boys, each of their adoptions, I made sure to seek and obtain their original birth certificates, because in North Carolina, after a child is adopted, they reissue a brand new birth certificate, and their original is sealed. And as far as I have heard, that's very difficult, I think, to get that or have any access to it, if it's even possible. So we really wanted to make sure we had those for them. But yeah, those are just some practical things. But I think the connection with any first family members is really where the value for their long-term stories are.
Yeah, that's awesome. And if we have people on the call who join because you have read the book and you really like reading, everything Kelly said really is gone into depth in a book called The Girls Who Went Away, in terms of things that can be lost when families aren't still connected, or when you can't have the original birth certificate. And it brings up a lot of interesting points there. So if you want to know more about the value of doing it that way, and that's a really wonderful, healthy way when it's possible. I would encourage you to read that. Sarah had a follow-up to what Kelly said, so you can go ahead and do that.
It sounds like you're doing a great creative thing, Kelly. I have a friend who adopted a child, and what she did for him was kind of create a scrapbook, and of her experience of, this is, what your adoption was like, and this is what I know. And when he was 15, she gave it to him. And then, connecting with the family. So I just wanted to share something that I meant to share earlier, but then got sidetracked by my emotions. And then I thought of it again when Kelly was sharing. So one thing I will talk to patients or my clients about, and you may have seen this in relation to chronic pain, but I think it's really applicable to our stories in life. And so if you look at these dots, perhaps these are the stories or trauma, or you can identify it, whatever it is, right? Maybe it's the chronic health condition, whatever this is for you, right? And so I'm going to use it with the frame of reference of foster care. When we come into care, this takes up what feels like our whole life, right? Yes, we feel out of control. It's so much of our identity. We don't know who we are outside of what's happened to us, and it feels like our whole life. And so the beauty of having more life and more experiences with a foster family or through our own identity development is not, the goal isn't to change what's happened, right? You see, it's the same in both. The difference is life gets bigger and you get all these other experiences in here. And suddenly it's just not so big. And so I love this illustration of kind of a goal, right? The goal for me was never to change, like what Kelly was saying about preserving what was in an honest way, and not having this illusion about your life starts now. Like, no, that just sounds like trouble waiting to happen. And so, just preserving it in a way that honors the truth of what it is.
Awesome. Yeah. And Sarah, I didn't prep you for this one, but I did want to ask you, and Angela, but Angela gets a little bit of lead up time. Do you have any advice for older foster youth on the call tonight in terms of sharing their story with others?
There are older foster youth on the call? I didn't even know that.
There were well, it will be recorded and shared with more.
Okay. I would say, start where you're comfortable. I'm in love with the idea of psychological safety, and doing what feels safe to you is first and foremost. And, if you're not comfortable with written format, I would encourage you to maybe do some expressive arts, or like Angela was saying, poetry, or, some other form of expression. That I remember doing this as a child, kind of encryptive, because I had my family burn my journals. And so after that, I quit writing because people were reading. And so, whatever way, method you can find to express yourself, do it. It's so important. And then, as time goes on, I think we've all returned to ourselves multiple times to grow again. And just knowing that the process doesn't stop when you've written a piece, or when you've written a book, or when you've engaged in a project. It's, it's ever flowing and ever changing, and that's okay. That is absolutely okay. And just, kind of making a deal with yourself to return to it as it comes up and as needed. And yeah, that'd be my answer.
Awesome. Yeah. It's not, it's everybody feels the same way. We all look at our lives and we come back to it and we're like, I saw it this way then, and now I know a little bit more, and it's like this. And trauma would definitely play a big part of your perception, in all of our perceptions. And so giving yourself that ability to say, I changed my mind is okay, especially even if it's your story. It's like, it's my story, and this is how it's being explained to me now and how I understand it. Angela, do you want to add anything else to that question?
Yeah, what I just wanted to say is that, you know, a lot of us go through a lot of trauma. And what I've learned as I've met so many amazing human beings is that it's really hard for us to talk about it. And a lot of times we just kind of, you know, push it away. So, you know, for me, whether it's spoken word or the book, or, you know, whatever others are looking to do with their story, if they are interested in sharing their story, just definitely give yourself grace, and also find the purpose in it, you know, find the divine purpose in it. What is the reason why you specifically went through what you went through? You know, that's really what pushed me in all the work that I'm into now. And it's, you know, why did I specifically go through poverty? You know, why did I specifically go through having two parents that had severe mental health issues? You know, all these other different layers of trauma and experiences that I used to be like, why me, in a way of like, you know, victimhood. But now, like, wait, why was it me? You know, what was the purpose that I need to give back into these communities? And what is it that needs to be changed? And what I see is that there's definitely a lot, just even the way that foster care is shaped, and this narrative of, you know, disregard the family and focus on the child. That's not healthy. We need to really focus on the preservation of, you know, these families if possible. If not, then, you know, how can we really build community in foster care? And that's all part of recognizing what is the purpose in our stories. And secondly, knowing that there's definitely going to be a lot more healing that needs to be done. As Sarah has shared earlier, you know, when you are talking about that stuff, like I was so angry when I was writing the Black Foster Youth Handbook. I feel like more so like in a healing aspect with sharing with Empty Frames Initiative, but I didn't even realize other different layers when I got even deeper about, you know, talking about success, talking about how I define it, how I define home, which was a really touchy subject if you've moved over 20 times by the time you're 16. So there's purpose in that. What is the reason why, you know, I specifically went through that? What can I change with my story? What can I share so that way the next people coming through foster care don't have to go through it, or families even getting through child welfare system. But I would also encourage, you know, any of the social workers and foster parents as well to, you know, share your stories. Anyone that's gone through trauma, anyone that has a story and knows, like, you know what, I didn't go through this for no reason. It's definitely not in vain. And yeah, so that's what I would say. I have a lot more to say, but for the most part, I shared a lot of it in this 400-page book. So that's what I'll say for right now. Thank you so much, Miriam.
Gail has a really cool announcement. I missed it in the chat, but she wants to make an announcement.
So if you are a resource parent tonight, so a foster, adopted, kinship, guardianship parent, I'm going to put the evaluation into the chat. In there, it's going to ask your address, and that is not to stalk you or anything like that, but that is for us to be able to, with Foster Family Alliance, we're going to purchase every one of you that are here tonight and on the call, on the webinar, we're going to purchase a book for you, and we'll mail it out to you. So you'll have to fill out the evaluation and your address to get it. So it will come, I'll get them done probably by the end of the week, and they'll be to you. So I'm going to put the evaluation up in there. And the other thing to notice at the end of the evaluation, you will see another evaluation, another link at the very end on the last page. That is to sign up for our summit that's happening this weekend from 10 until 2:30. And we have huge like prizes to give away. We have overnight trips, things like that. And again, it's webinar format. You can come to some of it or all of it, but you do have to be present online at 2 o'clock to be registered for the prizes. So I did want to throw that in there. And then, Ms. Carmelita, do you want to take a few minutes?
Yes, this is Ms. Carmelita with Sayso, which stands for Strong Able Youth Speaking Out, where the mission of Sayso is to work to improve the substitute care system by educating the community, speaking out about needed changes, and providing support to youth who are or have been in substitute care. We work with youth and young people between the ages of 14 to 24. Also on this Saturday, we are having a youth event for young people between the ages of 13 to 21. You can go to our website, www.saysoinc.org. If you have any young people this Saturday that would like to participate in a Sayso event, also Sayso is holding a virtual graduation, just honoring all of our graduates from about 5 different counties and that are connected to Sayso, just really celebrating them and their accomplishments. We all know the statistics around youth who are in foster care that says they won't graduate, and especially from college. And we actually are celebrating and celebrating some young people who are graduating from college as well. So I just wanted to lift up those announcements, but we'll send those to Gail so she can send it out afterwards as well. Thank you.
You can do that. All right, are there any questions or anything that you want answered by the guest? And I'll make sure you have their emails also when I send out everything. If not, you guys are amazing. Miriam, do you have something you want to share?
I was just going to add really quickly, all of our authors, when you get the book, everyone who shared tonight, their writings in the book is color coordinated, so you can go through and you can read their pieces and you'll know what some of the ones that they've referred to tonight, and you can like look at the recording and then go back to it. There's some really wonderful insights, and I really appreciate all of you guys being on the call tonight. So thank you again.
Excellent. All right. Okay, and Sarah has put her email in the chat, and I can also I can save the chat if we want to save. I'll pull all that out for everyone. All right, and then let me